Good afternoon. My name is Joseph Harris. I'm the director of the National High School Center, and I'd like to welcome you to this online webinar and chat on behalf of the National High School Center, the National Center on Response to Intervention, and the National Center on Intensive Interventions. We're really pleased that you'll be able to join us today. In addition to logging on to this webinar through WebEx, you also, if you're hearing my voice, should have dialed into a conference call number, and later we'll be asking you to join us for a live chat in the Community of Practice chat room. We'll give you the directions on how to do that when we get to the end of the formal presentation. As you see from the title, we're focusing today on aligning tiered interventions with high school initiatives. The three centers you see on the screen have been working collaboratively on this topic for some time. It's clearly a topic of great interest. We have over 420 registered participants today, and we hope all of you have been able to join us. Looking at our webinar agenda, we're going to start with a very brief introduction of our speakers and then follow that by a district approach presentation by Judy Elliott, and then a high school's approach presentation by Jill Martin. After that, we'll have a guided discussion with questions submitted by many of you during the registration process, a panel discussion between Judy and Jill, and then we will share with you the overview of our new online community of practice, and then those that wish to stay with us will be able to join us in a chat with Judy and Jill participating afterwards. So in order to speed things up for the different presentations, I'm going to briefly introduce all our speakers at one time, starting first with Judy Elliott. Judy is the former Chief Academic Officer of the LA Unified School District and also was a former Assistant Superintendent at Long Beach Unified School District, and before each of those roles served as a senior researcher at the National Center on Educational Outcomes. Jill is currently a principal at Pine Creek High School and has also was selected as the 2007 NASSP MetLife Principal of the Year. They will again give separate presentations, and then Lou Danielson will lead a discussion. And Lou is currently the project director of the National Center on Intensive Interventions and senior advisor to both the RTI Center and the High School Center. Finally, Jessica Agus, who is a talented research assistant who splits her time across all three centers, will give you an overview of our new community of practice. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Judy Elliott and welcome her to the presentation.
Well, thank you, and it's a pleasure to be with all of you today. So the first slide of the presentation really talks about the overview of the Los Angeles Unified School District in terms of the number of students in the district, how many schools we have. My approach with you in the short time that we have together is really kind of to give you just an overall context of the district, and then kind of talk to you a little bit about how we approach the response to instruction intervention systemically. So as you can see from slide 6, we have a lot of diversity. It's a very large district, but I don't want folks to be overwhelmed by the size of the district because the work is the same, whether you have a very small suburban rural district or whether you have a very large district like Los Angeles. And so I was honored with the opportunity to be the Chief Academic Officer of the district for the last 3.5 years. And on slide 7, if you look at it, talking about RTI squared, in the state of California, we don't call it RTI, we call it the response to instruction and intervention, because really this is about response to instruction. It's not about putting kids in intervention. It's really about looking at good first teaching. And so for us, as we did this in the district, we really focused on core. And so we used RTI squared as a framework to really embed all the work. And so it really is not seen as an initiative. It is the work that we do every day around instruction. And so what the framework really did is it allowed us to figure out our return on investment of all the other things that we were doing in the district. So You know, when I came into the district, I was asking, you know, you've got kids in interventions, how are they doing? What's the data say about kids really improving their instruction? How many kids are enrolled in advanced placement courses? How many kids are passing? So what the framework allowed us to do is to really use data as a front and center practice. At every level of the organization, we really looked at as whether or not we were getting that return on investment. So RTI Squared really gave us permission to use data to drive our instructional practices. And so the next slide shows, you know, what we aligned. And really, again, this was about core instruction. It wasn't about interventions. And using those data in the state of California, which I know that there are lots of states across the country have high school exit exams, you know, by using data, we realized that our high school students were not doing well on their first-time pass rates for our high school exit exam. So we actually created a practice exit exam. We really increased our efforts around AVID. And AVID, as you know, is a great program for students in that program. However, we didn't have the data around that to say that we were implementing it robustly K-12. And so anyway, you can see all the things that we really looked at. We created an algebra end-of-course exam because we had kids taking algebra in 7th and 8th grade that were, again, having to retake it again in high school. And so it just didn't make sense. So we created an end-of-course exam. We initiated homework grading and policy because our data was showing that some of the kids were not getting reclassified as English learners because they weren't getting a C or better in their classes, and come to find out that was because they weren't getting their homework done. So the whole purpose of this, saying this to y'all, is because it's really not about picking kids in interventions. It's really using data in a multi-tiered system to actually figure out whether what you're delivering for kids is really working. And so, as I mentioned earlier, as we started into this, we didn't have a whole lot of use of data. We had amazing data in the district, incredible data warehouse, but we tend to admire the data rather than use the data to drive instructional practice. And so we really use that to create district-level sponsored programs. So we would sponsor a Tier 2 or a Tier 3, which means we paid from it from my office. And then in addition to that, we also created exit and entrance criteria. So there were multiple measures that were used to decide whether or not a student was eligible, if you will, for a Tier 2 or a Tier 3, and it wasn't a life sentence. We put exit criteria together so that kids could move fluidly between those interventions that were being done at the district level. On slide 9, you know, how we aligned it, and again, this is the work. This is not about an initiative. This is, and our, under the superintendency of Ray Cortinas, our mantra was results will set you free. So at our high schools, particularly, the greater growth you showed, the greater autonomy you had. And our alignment was really around the sense of urgency. And we really worked to create a district infrastructure to actually communicate expectations to folks. This was not a top-down mandate. This was it was a top-down, bottom-up. It was a grassroots effort. It was about really honoring the work, celebrating the excellent work that had been done before, but also using multiple measures to create a tiering of systems, if you will. And some of that was, quite frankly, based on survival of a budget decimation. And we actually knew that we didn't have enough folks to support schools, so we created a tiering of schools, what meant if you were a focus school, you got a lot more support than if you were an excelling school. So using those multiple measures, we actually created a tiered system where we could create differentiated accountability and support for our schools. Now remember, we had close to 1,000 buildings in the district, so that's a lot of schools that need different help. But by using data and tiering them, we were able to get better at providing those support. Successes and challenges, I would tell you, we took all of our K-12 schools and put them in cohorts, and each cohort went through 2 years of professional development, and it was really focused around data. And so if you can see on slide 10, in 2011, Los Angeles had the highest gain in the state of California for urban districts. And yes, when you're at the bottom, it's easier to grow, but I would tell you having the highest gains in the state and then really celebrating the growth over 2 years, a 36-point growth for our African-American students, 48 points for our special ed, and 31 points growth with our English learners over a period of 2 years. And really it was based upon the fact that our year one was tier one. We looked at core instruction. We used our data to make decisions. We stopped doing things that wasn't giving us a return on investment, and we built this database culture. And so for me, one of the things that we know is the vertical articulation that is free and cheap, but we're not real good in education doing. And so the goal of this work really was around a common language, common understanding, and really honoring work of people. This was not, this is better than what you've been doing. It really was about using data and having what I call courageous conversations, because we really don't have a society that believes all kids can learn. So having those courageous conversations about, well, what is it that we need to do to make sure that all kids learn to high levels? And then I guess I would say to you that our greatest challenge as we did this work, and continues to happen, is really immoral budget cuts. We had 7 days of furloughs and more furloughs this year. We had canceled summer school, so our K-8 schools no longer had summer school. The only thing that was going on in our high schools was really limited summer school for kids who were credit deficient. And then in building trust and consensus was really, really critical about that this is really not a new fad. This is really about a grassroots effort. This is about data. And so I would say, given the moral budget cuts and the furloughs and the canceled summer school, we still had the highest test scores we've ever had since 2002 in the district. And so what do we know as a result of this? On slide 12, you're never too big or small to do this work, ever. I mean, I've worked in smaller districts, and I've worked, obviously, in very large districts. It's not about the size. When I was in high school in Long Beach, we admired the problem that our high schools had 4,500 students, and we can't. It's too big. No. You sit down, you problem solve, and you create a plan using data to drive what kind of instruction and interventions that you need. This doesn't cost money. I will tell you, if you use your federal and state funds wisely, this is not a general fund initiative or effort that you have to support. It's really about being smart about how you use your money that you have. It's imperative to have a district plan. You've got to have a coherent, cogent plan, at least 2 to 3 years, that lays out your professional development. And if you don't put a stake in the ground around this as a district, you get that this too shall pass. Somebody's coming in with a new fad, and, there's no plan, and therefore there's no accountability. You've got to train your leadership. Everybody has to be involved. You've got to create a consensus around this. And my 2 major questions I ask people, are we happy with our data, and is every classroom we put our own flesh and blood? And if the answer is not yes to that, we have a lot of work to do. And for me, gentle pressure relentlessly applied. This is something that's, slow and steady wins the race. You've got to educate folks. You've got to get people comfortable. But at the end of the day, kids only get to go through school like 5th grade 1 year. They only get to take, 9th grade 1 year. So it really is about a sense of urgency as well as bringing people along. And then finally, I would say, it's really imperative that you get your boards of education. We did extensive training with our parents and communities so that they also knew what was going on. We built our model around consensus, infrastructure, and implementation. Yes, we have consensus, but do we have an infrastructure to actually support this work in order to implement it? And then I would say to you as a leader, if you're everybody's friend and favorite person, you ought to be a little worried, because this is hard, messy work. And there are people that are not going to embrace any kind of change, especially when you're using data. So I would say as a leader, whether that's a principal, a teacher, or a paraeducator, it's hard, messy work, but it's the best and hardest work you'll ever do. So with that, I will turn it over to Jill.
Thank you, Judy. It was exciting to hear what you've been up to there. And my part of this is to take that macro approach that you discussed and then interpret it at the school building level. So I'm excited to share with you, with all of you that are here. I am a high school principal. I'm sitting in my office right now, and I'm relieved to hear from you, Judy, that I shouldn't feel like I have to be everybody's best friend, because today I'm definitely not. My presentation, starting on the next slide, will explain my context here. I don't see that next slide coming up. Could we switch to that next slide?
We're having
Okay,
a little
great.
bit of trouble hearing you, Jill, so I just want to check with the operator to see if there's anything going on your end.
Okay.
Jamie?
So now I'll see if I can mute one of the lines. Be with me for just a moment.
Okay. And Jill, you just
Yes.
have your phone on, right? I'm wondering if there's any feedback from anything else around.
No, there's nothing else on.
Okay.
Sounds better now.
Oh, it sounds better. All right, please continue.
Okay, thank you. And for those of you who could not hear me, I apologize. I'm Jill Martin. I'm the principal at Pine Creek High School in Colorado Springs, Colorado. And I mentioned that I was relieved to hear from Judy that I don't need to be everybody's best friend, because today, as you know, this is a stressful time in the spring for everybody, and today I'm not everybody's best friend, so thanks for the opportunity to share with you. This will be a high point of my day. I do have some interesting experiences with the implementation and alignment associated with RTI at two different high schools. Currently, I'm principal of a high-performing high school in Colorado Springs, Colorado. And in Colorado, we do have what is called the growth model. And what we're most proud of is that our students are exhibiting high growth as well as high performance. On the other hand, when you're at that kind of a school, it's difficult sometimes to develop what Judy mentioned, which is the necessary sense of urgency to implement something like RTI and to align that with other initiatives. Previously, I was principal at Doherty High School, which is a little bit larger high school in another district in Colorado Springs. That was an urban fringe school in which RTI really became a focus and enabled us to become a high-achieving school. And I was there for 9 years, and it really took about 7 years to get the RTI model going. So this is messy work, as Judy said, and it is time. Change is a process, not an event. It's time-consuming. The next slide really talks about why we decided at both of those schools that it was essential to align our other initiatives with response to intervention, as we call it in Colorado. And the quote at the bottom kind of sums it up. At both schools, we talked about this question: what is the business of our business? And in answering that, teachers, staff always come up, parents, kids, they always come up with the idea that we are here for all students and educating all kids is our mission. So it was very helpful for us to realize then that RTI didn't have to be an imposition of a new program, but could be an answer, a solution. So on the next slide, I'll share with you what we aligned. And at both schools, we really started with the professional learning community's work. Many of you are familiar with Rick DeForest's book, Whatever It Takes. At one of the schools, we did a book study. At the other, we discussed the concepts. At one of the schools, we used the term PLC. At the other school, we didn't. We just talked about the work. And that all goes back to your assessing your own culture and what will work best there. But we did ask the 4 questions that professional learning communities focus on. And those were very helpful. And the questions are listed for you there on the slide, but in case someone can't see the slide, the questions involve asking, what do we want kids to learn? And, of course, that's curriculum alignment and aligning with other initiatives. How do we know if they learned it? Assessment and data. What do we do if they don't learn? That's where we get into the interventions, as well as what do we do if they already know it? We asked our staff at both schools, what are we already doing to address student needs? And where would those initiatives fit on a pyramid of interventions? And it was very affirming, as the next slide discusses. It was very affirming that we could celebrate the work we were already doing. Judy mentioned how important it is to honor what's already in place. This is really a priority. And once we were able to do that, teachers could see, wow, in doing the work that we do every day, we are knocking ourselves out to meet the needs of the kids. And that's great, and we want to celebrate that. But the next step then required collaborating to say, okay, how do we know this is working? And that involved curriculum alignment and developing common assessments, as well as a very challenging process and messy process at the high school level that we're still involved with, trying to determine how to progress monitor what's appropriate in a high school classroom. How do we really know the kids are doing what we need them to do and learning what we need them to learn in a standards-based environment? We implemented problem-solving teams at both schools that worked on specific identification of students and recommendations for interventions, and an oversight team at each school that reviewed school-wide data to ensure that interventions were in place and effective. And in both schools, that oversight team decided to recommend that we really needed to look at the AVID program, just as Judy mentioned, that's become very important for them. Here in Colorado, AVID is not quite as popular as it is in California. We found that it was a great alternative to meet the needs of our underperforming but capable students, and that's been a wonderful addition to what we consider a Tier 2 intervention. So as a result, teachers began to see that students really did do better when they could use data to inform instruction, and not only use it as teachers, but share it with the students and to identify students who needed more intervention. Teachers really are, and I'm preaching to the choir, but teachers really are under stress right now. We're all trying to implement new standards, Common Core standards, state standards, to differentiate instruction. In our state, our evaluation system has changed, and teachers will be evaluated based on student growth as measured by our state tests. So it's a challenging time, and morale can be an issue. RTI can be shared with the staff as a way to support them and provide solutions to help them ensure that students are growing, which will help them then on their ultimate evaluation. The ongoing challenge really is about vision. And I love this quote, that nothing stops an organization faster than people who believe that the way they worked yesterday is the best way to work tomorrow. As we're all looking at 21st century skills, and of course we're in the 21st century, one of the roles that I think our leadership team has assumed is to be those visionaries, to help people keep remembering that life is changing, and the world that we're sending kids into is very different than the world we were educated in, and I think making this part of that overall vision, making RTI and other initiatives part of that really helps. So lessons learned, which is the next slide. The next slide starts with another quote that I really like, because I think it sums up the problem in a building. We all go to our meetings at the district level, no disrespect here at all, but we leave with our marching orders. And even though the idea is this wasn't a top-down initiative in our district either, really it was, we were all told this is something that they hope and expect we will do. Maybe that's that gentle, relentless pressure that Judy talked about. But ultimately, the challenge is that school culture is going to make or break any initiative. And RTI has to become part of the way that we do our work, as Judy said. So as Roland Barth said, the school culture has far more influence on life and learning than all of the mandates that we may be given. So what do we do about that? Okay, lessons learned. The next slide shares what I've discovered trying to implement this in two different high schools that had very different cultures. First of all, every leader knows you have to understand the culture before you try to change it. Once you've got a handle on that, really what you need to do is work on that culture. Figure out what is it that makes people proud in that school, what can you honor and celebrate, and that's the place you need to start. We also found we need to show teachers what's in it for them so that it doesn't become just another flavor of the month. that it really is going to be something that will make their job easier. I don't know any teachers that come to school every day saying, gee, I hope all my kids fail. High school teachers really are about the content, but they also really want kids to be successful. And if we can provide resources for them so that this will make their job ultimately easier, they respond very positively to the new initiatives. I think it's essential that we provide time for them to collaborate, to share best practices, and to share triumphs and challenges. Judy mentioned how important data is, and the data has to be user-friendly. And they really do teachers need support. They need to understand what applying a Tier 1 intervention really means. And one of the things we found was the most successful was having them visit other schools in addition to bringing in information and ideas. And then finally, I do agree with Judy. It's not necessarily that you have to have additional money, but you need to use the resources that you do have, and that may mean changing the way you staff so that you provide some staffing for interventions, as well as that most precious resource, time, and ensuring that you provide enough time for teachers to make this paradigm shift so that they see that their job really is to make it possible for every single kid to learn and achieve. Now I'll turn it over to our moderator.
Thank you, Jill and Judy, for wonderful presentations. I should point out that the questions that we're addressing to Judy and Jill are questions that actually came from folks in the community who have actually registered with the community. And of course, these don't reflect all of the questions, but some of the questions that we received that we thought that might be of broad interest to those that are participating today. So let me start. You'll see the questions on the screen. Let me start with the first question and address this initially to Judy. So Judy, how did your district culture support or challenge your efforts to align the RTI squared with other initiatives in LA Unified?
I think it was just the way we approached it. It wasn't an issue of support or challenge. We really just basically said results will set you free, and how you doing with your data. And it's not just about the overall school growth, but it was including all your student groups. And so, I agree with Jill. I think part of this is that, people are in education because they really do want to improve the teaching and learning of all students. And so part of it was really looking at professional development needed to be, shored up and really support teachers. It's too easy to hammer people right now in the environment that we're in and saying, bad teacher, bad principal, rather than saying, you know what, let's work on this together. And so really for me as a leader, it's how you roll something out. If it's, my way or the highway, which lots of people in lots of big districts are so used to having, it is about gentle pressure because, you don't get to have a group of kids left behind. And so for us, it really was providing the resources, listening to the field, providing solid professional development where teams could get together and talk about their work, and really creating the conditions for people to take risks to actually get out there and do good stuff for kids.
Jill, let me follow up with you. At the school building level, I think I've heard people say that RTI sometimes is at odds with the culture of high schools. And did you experience issues in your school with kind of cultural resistance to the changes you were putting in place?
Yes, and I think change is scary for people. And this just seemed like one more thing added to teachers' already full plates. At both of the schools, despite the very different cultures, the lower performance in the one school, which created a different kind of sense of urgency, but at both schools, people felt they couldn't do one more thing. And so what we tried to do was to say, hey, we have to teach to the standards. This is something that we're moving toward, and how can RTI help us with this? What do we do about the kids who aren't mastering the standards? How can we reorganize to provide support for you so that you can support students? And I think that really made a difference when teachers could see how this could help them rather than be one more thing they had to do.
And if I could add to that, Jill, it is so imperative for people. This is the work that we should be doing. This is not a new initiative. This is not a new fad. This is really about differentiated instruction, using data to make decisions, and just get better at our practice. It really has to be very carefully articulated that this is not in addition to what you're doing. This is the work we should be doing from the get-go.
Great. And I've actually heard other folks say that it's about, in some ways, maybe reframing RTI so people see how it connects to the stuff they're already doing. Moving on to the second question, and Jill, I think on the second question I might start with you, since it gives you an opportunity to kind of talk about the school leaders, administrators in your district. And so the question then is, how might you, or did you, emphasize the importance of alignment with RTI as you dealt with school leaders, administrators in your district?
The bottom line is we are all here, as Judy said, to make sure that we are meeting the needs of all kids, and this is the work that we do. All of us across the country are implementing not only state standards but Common Core standards, and that's the emphasis in our district as well. And so we just really worked hard on the idea of saying, how do we continue to do the work we do only to maximize our positive results? And that's where the data came in. So, the bottom line was, if we could provide data, like Judy's data, showing the increased test scores, and we too were able to help close the achievement gap and to see improved test scores, that's very rewarding for teachers, and it also helps district officials then feel they can support you if you go to them asking for some out-of-the-box changes, like changing your schedule to provide collaborative time.
Right. And Judy, in your work, did you encounter resistance on the part of other program leaders, administrators within the district? And if so, how were you able to handle that?
Well, I think, as Jill said, change is hard. I think doing anything, you've got to have relationships. This is really about building relationships, building the trust. I personally do not believe in the expert model. I don't believe one person knows everything there is to know about something. And so it's the way you bring everybody to the table. I always talk about every ed. So you have special ed and general ed and EL ed, and you get everybody at the table having a discussion about, we aren't happy with our data. We need to move it. Is there, what do we need to be doing differently? And so I think the resistance in any, district when you have lots of changes in leadership is people say, well, how long is he or she going to be around? Well, we can stand on our head for a couple of years and we won't have to do this. But when people are saying that the problem is that good instruction is not being delivered and teachers are not teaching to the standards and all of the things that are going on, it really is about creating a community of practice, as we are here, but having those courageous conversations to say, what do we need to do to make it better? You may not like this, but I always say to people, if not RTI, then what? And so you're always going to have you're never done with consensus building. It is always an open conversation that you always must have across your building, across your district, from the boardroom to the classroom. It's building consensus continually. This is hard work. And so I think I don't know anything that hasn't been done with some sort of resistance, but in my book, resistance is a symptom of a bigger issue. It means that there's something that's not aligned for somebody, that there is resistance, and there's usually pretty good reason for it.
Good point. Excellent point. On this next question about how could an RTI program be aligned with state assessments, I think I'm going to change this a little bit and say, is this a conversation in either of your districts or schools that really ever came up about alignment of the RTI program with state assessment. Is that a conversation that even happens? Judy, would you like to go first?
This is Judy. I guess for me, my struggle with the question is it's making RTI seem like, RTI for one thing is really not a program. It's, in my book, it's a way of work. It's database decision-making that utilizes the problem-solving process to differentiate instruction and behavior, right? So one of the things we haven't really talked about is, RTI is kind of the umbrella under which instruction and instruction and behavior, kind of efforts go. But it's a way of working. It's a way of instruction. So does it align with the state? Absolutely. It is what we should be doing to differentiate instruction to have kids get better at state assessments. I would say in the state of California, there hasn't been a lot of pointed discussion around RTI and the state assessment because I think there tends to be some disconnect. But I guess for me, I don't see it as how does it fit because it's about differentiated instruction.
Yeah. Very good point. Jill, did you want to comment on this one?
Sure. In Colorado, we are evaluated as schools on something called the School Performance Framework, which focuses on how you do on those state assessments. Then you're required to develop what's called a Unified Improvement Plan, a school improvement plan. And so for us, where RTI fits in is that and I agree, it is not a program, but we look at those data from those state assessments as well as failure rates, attendance rates, all these things that make a school successful, and build that into our Unified Improvement Plan. And so RTI provides support for that so that we can say, oh, wow, we are not doing well here according to the data. What do we need to do? What interventions do we need to provide in order to improve?
Thank you. One of the things I think that we all are hearing lots about these days are the Common Core standards, and kind of maybe a way of reframing this question is: do you see a connection or how would you see a connection between the emergence of Common Core standards and the tiered intervention work that you've been involved with? Jill, do you want to take that? Jill, would you like to take that one first?
Sure. I think we've kind of alluded to this in that, but if you go back to the 4 questions that you ask in a professional learning community, the Common Core standards help us to answer what do we want kids to learn, and how do we know then if they learned it through looking at the results of those assessments. So clearly, RTI then helps us answer the next question is, what do we do if they haven't learned it? Or even the 4th question, what if they already know it? What else can we do to provide every opportunity for every student?
Great.
Yeah, and I would just add to this, I don't see Common Core standards being any different than what the standards we have. I mean, let me make sure I'm careful about that. They're very, very different in terms of standards, bigger, deeper, higher. However, the approach to doing Common Core standards within the framework of RTI is not really any different than doing your current standards now. It is, and what Bill said, it's what kids need to know and be able to do.
Right. Jill, I think I'm just going to pose this next question to you, and I know it's something that we've heard a lot about before, about the issue of schedule and the implementation of tiered interventions. So did the implementation of tiered interventions create issues with scheduling in your school?
Yes, absolutely. In that we needed to find a way to be able to provide time for these students to do things like maybe double up in algebra if they were failing algebra, or for individual students to get time to work one-to-one in a guided study hall or some other intervention situation. Also, in terms of scheduling, and I know I mentioned this a couple of times, but we had to find a way to provide time for our teachers. the word messy was used earlier by Judy. It's a great word. We just had a meeting earlier today of our counselors, administrators, and several others involved with RTI, and we use the term messy. It requires time to look at problems, to look at how kids are doing, and then to find time in the high school schedule is very difficult. So it was challenging, but it was exciting, and we've been able to make those changes without too much difficulty in order to be able to facilitate the work that we need to do.
Thanks, Jill. I'm going to jump. I realized I took that one out of order, so I'm going to jump back to this issue of tutor interventions and issues around subgroups, and I'm going to reframe this question slightly. So, Judy, I know that in LA Unified you certainly have great diversity with regard to all of these populations, and did that pose any particular challenges to you as you were implementing your RTI squared in LA Unified?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think what it did was actually put a greater lens and focus on how kids are ending up in those student groups. So we know that a lot of times the kids in special ed are spillage or kids that don't do well in the core instruction, and so the only game in town was to put them into special ed or put them in at-risk or, some other program. So it really enhanced our ability to really look at good first teaching and the practices we're doing for all kids. I mean, people would say we know we're not meeting the needs of all of our, our mainstream type of kiddos. I would also say that it also had us look at our EL data, and if our kids were not redesignating or something wasn't moving in terms of progress, it would be, well, why is that happening? And so quickly in education, we're so quick to put kids under the microscope and say the problem's within the child rather than saying, what is it about our instructional environment? So for us, RTI raised us really looking at, good instruction. And the other thing would be that, the framework of RTI or the multi-tiered system is in special education. It is in when you're working with EL. So it's not, so it absolutely, I think, did everything for us to have a broader conversation about working with our student groups.
Thanks, Judy. Jill, I think I'm going to skip on to this next
Sure.
question. And so, Jill, I believe in Colorado they're implementing for example, the positive behavior interventions and supports approach, and of course, some schools are implementing other discipline frameworks as well. Do you have any experience attempting to implement both the RTI focused on, kind of academics as well as PBS work? Have you been involved in all in doing both of those?
Yes. At Doherty High School, we became involved with PBS. It was very consistent with the other work we were doing in RTI, and we're actually starting to look at something similar here at Pine Creek. I think the bottom line is it's very helpful to look at your interventions for students with behavioral issues, and certainly at the high school level, attendance and truancy are a big part of what we need to work with high school students, and so it has really helped to organize that, to do a better job of collecting data, to train teachers with appropriate interventions, and then to respond if those interventions aren't working.
Great, and I think we're running out of time for this section of it, and I think there's one last question that is, and each of you, I think, addressed this to some extent, but I think in these days, I guess always this is an important question, and these days maybe even more critical, which is actually the next to the last question on the last slide, is how are you able to leverage existing resources to facilitate implementation and scaling up of your tiered intervention initiative? I think people would like to hear from both of you on this question. So, Judy, would you like to respond first?
Sure. Because I think people say, oh, new initiative, new thing, we got to have more FTE, more people, more bodies. This is really a call to action in terms of reallocating and re-examining your current FTE. The question of the day is, are you getting a return on investment in what people are doing? And the question at my office, at my level, that I would say to my staff is, if you weren't here next year, would you be missed? And what are you doing on a daily basis that impacts the building classroom instruction? And so in a really significant, and under my leadership at a district level, is that I really believe the central office exists to support our schools, our teachers, our principals. And so for us, what we did in LA is we used not one penny of general fund. We used our Title I, our Title III, our state funding. We reallocated current positions that were doing certain things that were not getting a return on investment. So I'm here to say that in any place that I've worked, this is not a huge budget issue at all.
And I would say that I can second that from the building level, because we just didn't have any additional fiscal resources to. So we had to be more creative right now with the economy and budget cuts and staffing cuts that in our district and at our high school. We needed to get creative. So we spent a lot of time collaborating as a staff to say, what do we really need to do with our precious resources, and those are time and staffing. And we did make decisions about reallocating staffing. Maybe it meant 1 or 2 more kids per classroom, but it also meant a person then to come in and help that teacher or pull kids out and intervene where needed, and the staff really felt that would be worth it. And time is a huge resource.
Great. Thank you so much to both of you for your candid responses to these questions. At this point, I'm going to hand it over to Jessica Agus, who's going to talk about the high school tiered intervention community practice. So, Jess?
Thanks, Lou. Welcome. So glad you were able to join with us today and talk about this topic. And since you're interested in this topic, we really hope that you will join our community of practice, where we're going to share best practices and resources around tiered interventions. So today I'm going to talk quickly about what the community is, why we chose to create it, what our goals are, and ways that you can interact as members of the community. And I'll also show you a little bit about how to navigate through the community website so that you can join us for the chat, the live online chat that will follow the audio section of our webinar. So the community is a collaboration between the National High School Center, the National Center on Response to Intervention, and the National Center on Intensive Intervention. And we envision this space as a space where school and district staff can interact, share, and develop resources, and work on overcoming the challenges of implementing tiered interventions at the high school level. State staff and TA providers are also invited to join and provide valuable insight and resources. We chose the structure of a community of practice, which is really member-driven, because we knew that there is not a wealth of resources on the topic of tiered interventions at the high school level, and yet many schools and districts and states are implementing. And many are having success, as we heard today, and many are in the process of planning and refining their frameworks. So practitioners, we know, are generating knowledge and resources that can help others who are trying to do the same thing. And this community is a way to connect those who are implementing and that they can share what they're learning. Our goals for developing a community of practice around high school tiered interventions is to facilitate communication and collaboration among implementers to support the development of more effective practice pertaining to tiered interventions in high schools. We also want to support schools and district educators in implementing tiered interventions in high schools. We want to promote and disseminate research and evidence-based practices on topics around high school tiered interventions. And we want to gather information about how tiered interventions is being implemented in the field and what needs there are that we still need to address. So we hope that you share our belief in this community and that you decide to join. We know that this community will really only be successful if members decide to be actively engaged in it and decide to use it. So there are several ways that you can participate in the community. You can upload your resources that you've developed to help you implement tiered interventions. Those could be resources like PowerPoints or tools or handouts or your favorite links that you might have used in the past for RTI training or meetings with your data team. You can download, use, and comment on resources that are already up there. It can be helpful also to receive feedback. So if you download a resource, you might want to leave a comment for the author so that they can hear both positive and constructive feedback. You can also start or join a discussion. And this could be a question that you have about implementation, or you could describe a practice that you started in your school or district. And people have already started discussions, and so you can respond to theirs and see if you can answer their question or provide some more information. You can participate in community-wide events like this one, which you already are doing. And we plan to have additional webinars and live chats in the future. You can respond to community polls. We will put up polls about tiered interventions and also about the structure of the community so that we can improve and tailor the community to your needs. And you can provide feedback through the polls and also to our email address, nhsccommunity@air.org. So I want to give you a quick demonstration of how to navigate through the community. In order to find the Community of Practice homepage, the Tiered Interventions group page, discussions, resources, and polls. And there's a lot more on the community, and you can explore those other features as you have time. So you should be able to see my screen. I'm showing the Community of Practice website, and so if you go to community.betterhighschools.org, this is what you should see. And the first time that you come, you'll need to create a username and password, and I hope that many of you have done that already. But if you haven't, you go to this area that says Join and Learn More. Just answer a couple of questions, and your password and username will be sent to your email address. Once you have your username and password, you come up to the top box and click where it says Log In Now. You enter your username and your password. I hope I got mine right. I did. And it takes you to your updates page. And this page will have a stream of information about people that you follow on the community or groups that you follow. So to get to the main community homepage, there is this blue navigation at the top, and you want to click on the blue tab that says Home. Now keep this in mind, because if you decide to join the chat after this audio session, you will come onto this homepage and click on this link where it says click here to join today's high school tiered interventions community live chat. That won't usually be there, but that's to help us get to the live chat today. But on this homepage, you can find general information. You can join the high school tiered interventions group. You can join the National High School Center's Early Warning Systems group just by clicking on one of these bars. You can also get to the group pages by hovering over the tab that says Groups on the top navigation and clicking on the group that you're interested in. So I'm going to click on Tiered Interventions. That takes me to the High School Tiered Interventions community page. If you were coming for the first time, you'd need to click Join, and it would automatically take you into this page. So here you can see we're in the High School Tiered Interventions group. There are many different action items that you can take. Start a discussion, just click on one of the icons that are on the page. You can also navigate to see what discussions have been posted and what resources are available by clicking on the top navigation where it says Tiered Discussion. That would take me to the discussion page, and I can see that there are already some discussions happening. And I can click on Tiered Resources to find resources that others have uploaded. And I want to quickly go through the steps of how to access the online chat once we end the audio section of the call. During this online chat, you'll be able to ask questions to the panelists. They'll be on there. You'll be able to ask questions to National Center staff, and also have a discussion with others who are on the call, and you can share some of your own best practices. So in order to do this, you will close your internet browser where you're watching the webinar. Don't do it yet so that we can go through all of the steps. But you should be automatically directed to the community website, community.betterhighschools.org. If you're not automatically directed, then just make sure you go to that site. You should log in with your community username and password. Again, if you don't already have a community username and password, you'll need to set one up on the home page that I showed you. Then you want to navigate to the community homepage, which is the main page where if you go to the top navigation and click home, that'll take you to the community homepage. And then you want to click on the link that says click here to join today's high school tiered interventions community live chat on the top of the homepage. And we do suggest that you stay on the phone line while you're getting to the live chat. Even though you're going to close the browser with the webinar, you want to stay on the phone line, because if you need technical support to access the chat, then you can press 1-4 to enter the queue for questions. And the National High School Center staff, Marshall Conley, will answer those questions. So I look forward to seeing you in the live chat, and I'm going to pass it over to Joe Harris.
Thank you, Jessica, and thank you, Lou, for leading the panel discussion, and a special thanks to Judy and Jill for their insightful and informative information about both the district and school-level perspectives of implementing RTI at the high school level. So we look forward to many of you continuing the conversation as we move over into the community of practice in the chat room. For those that will be, and for everyone, and especially those who will be leaving us because of other conflicts, we do want to ask that you join us again at the High School Center website, which is on the screen at betterhighschools.org, and that you invite you to follow us on Twitter, become a fan on Facebook, or visit our blog, which is updated 2 to 3 times per week. For those that are interested in a recorded version of this presentation, the recording will be available on our website starting on Thursday morning. And so you can get a copy of it, and if you would like a copy of the slides themselves separate from the recording, it will be posted as well. So again, I want, as Jessica has indicated, for those that are going to be joining the chat, please keep your phone line open in case you need to request technical assistance by pressing 1-4. And once you are online and you see the chat box, the small chat box that says chat roll at the bottom, it's an ongoing chat, so you'll be able to see the responses and questions of others as well. And if you wish, you can, there's an icon in the lower right-hand corner that you can press that will enlarge the chat box itself so to a larger part of your screen. So again, thanks for those that took time to stay with us and join us today. Thanks to our presenters, and we look forward to continuing the conversations in the next half hour in our chat, in our community of practice site, and we look forward to seeing many of you as you return to our community of practice to share some of your resources and engage your colleagues in conversations about the important work of implementing RTI at the high school level. Thank you. Have a great day, and we'll see you soon. Take care.